You are now listening to the fastest show on iSports Radio. My name is Daryl Kinsey Jr. Welcoming you to a lap extra mile for today, February 23rd, 2023. The Daytona 500 is over, so that means the real season can begin. And F1 testing has begun in Bahrain. Let the useless speculation begin. And help me talk about all of this and more, of course, my co-host, Christopher Lehman.
Hey Daryl, how you doing this evening?
I am doing absolutely wonderful. It was 76 degrees here for some reason. Which,
really?
Yeah, can't get used to it because it's going to be 40 tomorrow. And by Saturday, we're supposed to have rain or like wet snow during the day. So our weather is drunk down here in Florida, or not Florida, Maryland.
Maybe you're drunk too.
I don't know. It's been a long week and it's almost over. But
well,
yeah, Maryland weather has been drunk this year.
Well, Daryl, if it makes you feel better, we're going to be in the single digits this weekend. So
I'm sorry.
It's New York for you.
Yeah, I think New York City's actually supposed to get their first big snowstorm, which has been weird for them.
Probably. We haven't really gotten the snow we usually get.
Yeah, that's off-putting. Global warming, everybody. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into things today. Of course, we can't start this show without talking about the Daytona 500. And a lot of I can't even say how people feel about this race other than the constant nitpicking about the ratings, which, folks, there is nothing you and I can do about the NASCAR ratings. There's really not a lot NASCAR can do about the ratings. I can't figure out why people do and do not watch and why the numbers fluctuate. But sitting on Twitter talking about it and blaming this or that rule change is not going to make that better. So that's my PSA on that. But anyway, the Daytona 500, of course, was on Sunday, and the win was completely unexpected as Ricky Stenhouse Jr., JTG Doherty Racing, picks up the win. Joey Logano, our defending champion, was second. Christopher Bell was in third to complete the podium. All three manufacturers represented on the podium. And I guess we're going to talk about the end, because this has been, we're once again complaining about yellow flag finishes. My position on it is this: if the wreck is bad enough, call it. If they've taken the white flag, just call it. And AJ Allmendinger was on, not AJ Allmendinger, sorry, Parker Kligerman was on TikTok earlier this week and basically said something that I truly believe. At some point, the race has to end, especially at a super speedway. We can't keep trying to go green flag racing. You're going to wreck half the field. Actually, you're going to wreck the entire field. It's going to look like the last clash at Daytona where all the cars are wrecked and it's like half destroyed short track cars trying to come to the finish. I get it. Everyone wants that historic green flag finish. Sometimes you're just not going to get it. Sometimes the race is going to end under yellow, and we just have to deal with it. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I can see the pros and cons to either way it goes. You know, obviously there's an appeal to ending the race under the green flag, and that comes with its own consequences. You know, sometimes, depending on the race, sometimes you're in the Middle East in November and you decide you want to, sorry, Daryl, we made it 2 episodes in.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm saying though. Sometimes there's a pro and a con. So sometimes green flag racing, to the end is great. And we get these awesome finishes, unexpected finishes, or those historic finishes. But sometimes we get historic finishes in the other way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes maybe we do need to end under yellow. And I understand that I think it was Monza that we ended under yellow, right?
Yes.
And everybody was bummed, like, oh, what the hell? I was one of them. And even I'm pretty sure Max won it anyway. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I don't want to see Max win it under the yellow. I want him to take the checkered flag, like at full speed. So there's definitely pros and cons to it. And maybe it's just one of those things on speedways, on those super speedways. Maybe you do consider just ending under yellow, um, and keep it in the intermediates, or whatever, where you can actually get decent um, racing
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily just the thrill of the kill, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, because on super speedways, I mean, when we go green, white, checkered, we all know that we're just watching for the wreck. That's all we're doing.
And it happened like 3 or 4 times. I mean, we had to go to double overtime to begin with because we had
Yeah.
that first wreck on the first attempt, and then the second one. I don't know what Eric Almirola thought he was trying to accomplish, but hitting a yellow bumper in the middle of the corner because he hit Travis Pastrana to start the melee was not smart. And then poor Bubba Wallace just gets clipped by the barest of margins by Kyle Larson as he spins out. He gets collected and is robbed of a top 5 finish. You saw how my TikTok went when I was talking about the race after that. So
Yeah, and we, on my end of the spectrum, we, if it wasn't for that wreck, we were probably in line for like a 10th place finish, and we ended up picking a top 5. By we, I mean Alex Bowman, obviously.
yeah, Bowman
Um,
fell back there going into one. He lost his help.
yep, and then gained it back through Eric Almirola losing his talent, and so yeah, I can't necessarily empathize with you correctly, Daryl, just because I was a direct beneficiary of that accident.
I mean, with Bubba Wallace winning the Daytona 500, we'll get back to the finish in a moment. But with Bubba in the 500, it's either we get crashed or we almost win it. And it's been alternating. This year was the crash in the end. Next year, hopefully he'll win it. He would have had a chance coming off the backstretch, I think, as Davidson Crooks joins the chat. Says what's good. We're doing great, Davidson. Thank you for joining us. Larry B said the second one of the cars wrecked. Hit the wall. They called it. It's hard to tell because TV. It was pretty much delayed, but by the time they called it, everybody was involved. But by then, to be honest, you just got to end the race at some point. And NASCAR decided to do a modified ARCA rule where they have a limited attempts. But once you take the white flag, something happens, the race is over. And I'm absolutely fine with it being that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. Once that white flag waves, you can't throw a yellow and restart again. You have to call it what it is at that point. Um, yeah, and as far as the unlimited restarts, I don't agree with that. I think you cap it at 2. I think 2 is a fair. Oh, okay, we'll give it a fair shot to finish under green. But I mean, what happens? Would we really go 10 green white checkers deep? Would we be sitting there till 11 o'clock at night if they couldn't make it? Yes, by the rule book, yes, we would. And that's where we need to throw a little common sense in and maybe put a max in there.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we just can't keep trying to finish the race under green. We just can't.
No.
But, and Larry said, at least let them get back to the stripe. My problem with that is, once there's a wreck that big, you have got to get cars. I mean, you have got to get emergency crews out there. Because we saw with Ryan Newman. You don't know who's hurt. You don't know, who could be in distress. And if the wreck is that bad, we had some pretty bad hits to the outside wall face first. Once that happens, you got to roll the crews no matter what. So I get everybody wanting them to come around to the finish, take it under green. Sometimes that's just not going to happen, and we just have to accept it.
And to NASCAR's credit, though, if you do have some, like just 3 or 4 cars that kind of spin out on the backstretch, they let them race to the finish. If
they've let them go before.
Yeah, it's a case by case situation. Sometimes they're gonna let them run to the green flag. They've done it before. I couldn't say, oh, it was, you know, Las Vegas last year, whatever. I couldn't give you an example, but I can tell you that I know I've seen it where
I
there
mean,
has been an accident and they let them go to the green.
Perfect example.
Well, to the checkered.
Perfect example of the Daytona 500, the year Harvick won.
Yeah.
There's a complete melee going on behind him, like it's the end of Days of Thunder, and him and Mark Martin were allowed to race to it since they were already at the start-finish line. So they will do it within reason. But I think with that accident and all the scrutiny around the safety of the next-gen car, they're going to be calling this a little bit tighter.
Yeah, and it was just so close to the front that half the field got wiped up in it in some way or another. So you kind of have to call it to a degree.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to have the people in the back going race speed through that, and that's just not going to end well for anybody.
No, that was not going to end well at all if someone's going full speed through that. But, hey, people will complain about it every time it happens, but it's just a part of the furniture right now. But that doesn't take away a damper from what was an incredible superspeedway race. We had 52 lead changes among 21 drivers, according to our sister station, USRN, that had the call on Sunday. The 5-year average for Daytona 500s has been 24 lead changes. I personally think the superspeedway package is now in a good spot. We had two-wide racing all day long. We didn't see the dreaded train form at all. You can still push if you need to, and when you need to get the runs. And it's really back to that mid-2000s type of racing where it was based on the lines and the momentum and who could do what to push through or push down the straightaway, not through the corners. No pushing through the corners, Eric. But we're in a good spot now. It's just now the drivers have to get used to it. And I'm hoping that we don't see a lot of the careless bumps that lead to the wrecks that we saw there at the end, which really become a hallmark of superspeedway racing at the end now.
Yeah. And just to follow up with what you said about the better racing, the more exciting racing. Part of, I think, what made this race so fun was the fact that you could feel the strategy going on. I think Fox had a lot of criticism about the way that they called this race, but I actually thought that they did really well. Could they have been better? Of course. What broadcast team can't do better realistically? But I think they did a really good job of capturing the drama of this race and really the on track strategy that's going on, and just how these cars, they're so aero dependent that these guys they're not being as daring as they have been in the past, which actually leads to a more solid race. Yes. Sometimes when these guys, you get just kind of a loose cannon and it creates anarchy. And realistically, at the end of the day, as much as people say they want to see, the big one happen, you don't want to see it happen just because someone's being stupid, Eric Almirola. Yeah. You want to see it because it's just what happens when you race. It's inevitable, but you're seeing more, these guys, they're being more careful and more calculated. And I think the broadcast team did a really good job of highlighting why they were doing that rather than just letting it go. So I think I'm the only person, if you read Twitter, I think I'm the only person that's going to give the Fox broadcast team a pat on the back this week. I thought Tony Stewart and Clint were great.
I think they did fine. Clint was trying to set him up through the backstretch when the wreck happened, so of course he wasn't as excited as he could have sounded, but it is what it is. And to put a bow on the conversation about the package, spotter Brett Griffin was on Twitter and made the comment, that that super speedway is better when the spotters to say 3 and 4 wide. I don't really agree with that, because anytime these guys got 3 and 4 wide is when stupid crap happened, Eric. Sorry, we're just going to beat up on Eric Almirola for the next 15 minutes.
Well, he kind of deserves it.
Yeah, but
it was a boneheaded move.
it was, and that wasn't the only one. Boss, that means Denny. When these guys get 3 and 4 wide, stupid stuff happens because people just stop functioning smartly and just work on instinct, and it doesn't go well. I think this package is fine going forward, and trust me, they'll do something crazy at Talladega. But as long as you don't put a car upside down, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, which what was it? Was it ARCA where we had the car upside down this week? Didn't we have a car?
I'm trying.
Maybe
No, that was Xfinity. That was Xfinity at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a car upside down, almost the exact same way that the Ryan Newman flip happened.
Yep.
Because I saw it side by side, and I was like, "Holy heck, that's like exactly the same." Nah, yeah, you're right. Xfinity, not ARCA.
Which, by the way, pivoting to Xfinity just really quick. Junior Motorsports, how do you get all four of your cars lined up in the last 10 laps and nobody wins the race?
Yeah.
How do you do that? They had Austin Hill dead to rights. The 9 and the 8 get into it, or the 9 crashes. I don't remember what happened to the 8.
I don't know.
And then the 7 turns the 1 because Allgaier's blocking, and then the 1 just goes upside down, and Austin Hill wins back-to-back. How do you fumble the bag like that?
Well, if you ask Twitter, collusion. NASCAR wanted Hill to win.
What? The team owned... Okay.
You didn't. Well, it's Twitter. So
I can't with NASCAR Twitter right now. It's gonna be a long season with NASCAR Twitter. I already
Absolutely.
know because it started before we even got to the clash. But y'all, Dale Jr. owns the team. If they're gonna cheat for somebody, it's Junior.
Correct.
Lord have mercy.
Oh yeah. People were. We want to see screenshots. We need NASCAR to put out verifiable proof that that's the case, and
they put the picture out.
Oh yeah, but they're saying, well, we need to see the video, we need to see the in-car electronics at the moment the caution. People are full on. I mean, these people need to get outside and see the sun. Daryl.
Bro, it's not the 2020 presidential election. We don't need that much to determine who won a race. All right, sorry to inject politics.
These people do need that.
Apparently,
these people absolutely need that data. Yeah. Kind of like how miraculously during the NFL playoffs, and if Larry B is still here, he might be able to tell me which game it was. But apparently, the NFL has chips in the ball, and they can tell exactly where it was on the field, and they used it to determine whether the one team got a first down or not. Never heard about it afterwards, this chip. But for this one specific game, and Larry, I do hope you're here and you can help me out on this one. But
was it one of the championship games?
No, it was earlier. I almost think it was whoever the Bills played in the first round.
The Dolphins?
The Dolphins. I feel like that was the game. And
that's news to me. I didn't know there was a chip in the ball.
Yeah, so they used it to determine whether they got this 4th and short. And then after that, you never heard about this chip again. And we had some really spotty ball placement. And it turns out they have a chip in the ball the whole time, but they're still going with the on-call from the refs.
Jeez. Oh, okay, NFL.
Now I'm going to look this up.
Well, he looks that up. The NFL... Let's not get started. I'll let 3 and Out deal with that. But they do stuff that irks me. But not as bad as NASCAR officiating, which, by the way, we still have the suspension, no suspension list. We're going to be updating that all year. But the next thing from the race, Ford, absolutely untouchable in this race. Whatever they've done to that nose, it made them the fastest super speedway car. It reminded me of the 2000 Daytona 500 that Dale Jarrett won. Yes, I'm that old. and how that race went, where Ford just absolutely dominated. This race was much better than the 2000 Daytona 500, though. Until lap 183, where the Ford train was coming to pass the Chevys after a pit stop. The field Cindric, who was leading the line, gets balked. Brad Keselowski ends up on a spin, and Harvick, Briscoe, McDowell, Truex, Priest, and Ty Gibbs all get taken out. Jimmy Johnson also involved in that accident. But more importantly, that killed the Ford numbers game they were playing all day that they could never get back, which ended up with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. winning the race. And as I said online earlier this week, if you're a Ford executive, you were punching air the minute that wreck happened because they had it in the bag.
Sorry, Daryl, but I've got it now.
Okay.
So the next gen stats by that's run by, I believe, the NFL on Twitter.
Yeah, Amazon.
So this was the Bengals Ravens game, which now that I see it, I remember it. So they said, how close was Tyler Huntley to crossing the plane with the football? Which is, for anybody who's a football fan, that was when the Bengals forced the fumble by Tyler. From Tyler Huntley, returned it 99 yards. One of the defensive linemen returned it 99 yards for the tutty. I was ecstatic. But anyway, so on this tweet, they said, according to the chip in the football, the closest the ball got to the end zone was 0.6 yards away from the goal line, which is about probably about 2 feet, really. But that was the first that anybody heard of there being a chip in the ball. Like literally the first anybody has ever heard of it. And they just casually dropped it in a tweet.
Like, that's usually how these things go, right?
Yeah. And so I'm just seeing like all these people like you know how the internet is. Like sometimes the internet is a beautiful thing, and everybody, you see all of these like verified reporters and people like, what the hell do you mean there's a chip in the ball?
Yeah, why are we just finding out about this now?
Yeah. And apparently they've been in there for a couple years, and they just never told anybody.
So you mean to tell me, okay, NFL.
So, but then we never heard about it again. Yeah. So the fact that we're using the eye test at this day and age is ridiculous. Give us the chip, and the chip tells us where to put that ball.
Right.
Tangent, rant over. We've dedicated too much time to that already.
Yeah, so it's just the NFL being the NFL. But as I was saying, Ford had the advantage, and then lap 183 happened, and then Ford lost the advantage. And as I said, there was a Ford executive that watched those Fords pile up and was punching the air.
Yeah, that Ford train could only be undone by themselves.
Yep.
That is the classic trope. It's been played out 1,000 times, but the only person that could stop Ford was themselves, and they did ultimately succeed, like every other time you use that trope. Mm-hmm. And obviously that did not bode well for their efforts in the Daytona 500, because I think that those cars linked up, they were going to cause trouble. Those Fords were something else. Just, I think it was like 7 of them right in a row linked up for a while. Right around the pit stops, actually. Remember, because they went in, they did the smaller groups.
Yeah, they did the smaller groups of the pit stops, but somehow they all coalesced back together. And they got going, and everybody else, they just blew past them.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, Ford's going to be strong in the super speedways. They had a chance to win this Daytona 500. We'll see how all the noses work when we get to the first real track this weekend, depending on how dry it is. We'll get to that later. But it was a fun race. Unfortunately, not if you're a Ford fan. But if you're a Chevy fan, if you're a JTG Doherty fan, if you're a black race car fan, it was a lot of fun because Brad Daugherty, first black team owner to win the Daytona 500, which is incredible. We also had, I'm going to get this name right, with JTG Daugherty Racing, first woman to win the Daytona 500 as an owner as well.
That's awesome. And realistically, any, for a one car team winning the Daytona, getting that purse, getting that prestige, that's huge. That could turn that racing team. That could be a 2-car team next year just based off of this one win.
Yep.
Or that winning the Daytona 500, they say it every year. Your life changes when you walk into a restaurant. You walk into a restaurant as a Daytona 500 champion. That's true. And when you call a sponsor or you approach a sponsor, you do so as a Daytona 500 championship team.
Yep.
And so this really could open the door. And they have a decent sponsor already in Cottonelle and the Kroger brands. That's not a small sponsor. That's a big sponsor.
Kroger's been a long-time supporter of that team. And to see that long-time partnership get rewarded with a Daytona 500 win, something they can put in all their stores, in all their commercials. We don't have any Krogers near here, but for the Krogers that are out there, this is a big deal for that company. And that might get them a couple more years on their next contract when they have to go renew. And this is a big, for everybody involved that wins the Daytona 500, it's a life-changing moment. And you hope it's the precursor of better things to come, because in recent years, the Daytona 500 champion, that's usually their high watermark of the year, which is unfortunate. But
so obviously we hope that great things come to Daugherty, JTG Daugherty Racing as a result. They definitely have some momentum. They have the accolade of accolades to put on their resume now. And Kroger, like you said, Daryl, longtime sponsor of the sport, and it's great to see them in victory lane. And this could be the type of deal where when their contract's up, rather than saying we'll do a 1 or 2 year deal, maybe they're talking 3 or 4 or 5. And you also maybe get some of their other partnered brands to come in with them, and you could find funding for another car. So anything could happen, but they just congratulations to them. Great win.
Yep. Jody Geschichter was the first woman to win the Daytona 500. Now her husband Tad and Jody own that team, and Brad Daugherty bought into it later. Of course, Brad, another one of those North Carolina guys, really into NASCAR. He's from Black Mountain, North Carolina. Michael Jordan from the Charlotte area. And of course, now Brad gets to hold this over Michael Jordan because he's the first one of them to win the Daytona 500. But we'll see how things go forward, as Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is now the first driver to lock into the playoffs as well.
I have a feeling that they always say that he who laughs longest. And I think that Michael Jordan's saying to Brad, hey, you got this one, Brad. Congratulations. Awesome stuff. But we're going to be holding up one after Phoenix here in the next couple of years. And, I think that's going to be a fun rivalry to see. Obviously a friendly rivalry between the two. But it'll be fun to see how they jab at each other a little bit going back and forth.
So we're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, the NASCAR conversation is going to continue. Travis Pastrana nearly had a top 10 in his one and only Cup Series race. And Frankie Muniz participated in the ARCA race, and there was a tearful celebration in that race at the end. We'll talk about it here on the other side of this break, here on the Extra Mile on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davidson. It's your boy Dentarius Law.
And we are the hosts of Fast Break here on IE Sports Radio, where we discuss everything in the world of basketball from prep to the pros.
You guys should definitely check us out, man. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We got all the basketball information you guys need, so we look forward to you guys listening in.
And please do, because we are the best basketball show on this side of the Mississippi. And please do check us out on Twitter at FastBreakISR. D-Lock, where's our time again?
8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That give you guys plenty of time on a Sunday.
Tune in.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And we're back here in the Extra Mile on IE Sports Radio, your feed for all that is sports. Daryl and Chris with you this evening. Make sure to get your comments in if you're listening live. We will read them out on the show. Continuing our breakdown of the Daytona 500 as we're getting ready for Auto Club this weekend as well. Just took a look at the updated weather for the Auto Club Raceway weekend. The last one for this format of racetrack. It could be the last one ever the way it's going. But the Fontana, California weather, not looking good right now. As we look at it again here, currently tracking 100% chance of rain on Saturday, 20% on Sunday, but we're going to have to deal with the weepers. There's a slight chance of rain about race time tomorrow, or race time on Sunday. We hope they don't have to go to Monday, because Monday after 3 o'clock, you're not going to get this race in. So hopefully Xfinity can run sometime on Sunday, but we'll see if NASCAR can figure that out. But one last thing to hit on the track. Travis Pastrana, credit with leading 2 laps. One of those laps was when he was coming down a pit road with literally no one around them. Had a great weekend in trucks and cup. Finished 11th in the Daytona 500. Was credited with that after the accident at the end of the race. He had a lot of fun. He made the race. Said this was going to be his last one, but Chris, what do you think of Travis Pastrana's day?
I think his whole weekend was great. Start to finish. I mean, opens up Daytona 500 qualifying, speeds his way in, which is great. Pressure's off at that point, right? You're okay in the duels. You can take your time, and which is great because he ended up getting wrecked out anyway. Mm-hmm. So it was good that he got in on speed. Same with Jimmy. We haven't even talked about Jimmy, but Pastrana had a hell of a weekend. He did really good in the truck race too. I watched the at least 85% of the truck race. He was right up in there most of the time. Got a bit of air time just because of how well he was doing. Same thing with Cup race. I think he had a really good time. I think it was a one and only type of deal. I listened to a podcast where he talked about it, and he said that it was a bucket list thing. He wanted to do the Daytona 500. Same thing with Connor Daly. I listened to his Speed Street, which if you didn't listen to it this week, Daryl, he did have Frankie Muniz on, and they talked about his ARCA debut. But Connor Daly was just kind of talking about him, and he was kind of with Travis all weekend because they're friends outside. And it was a bucket list item for him, and it'll probably be a one-off. But what a way to do a one-off! You finish 11th. You were probably in line for a top 5 realistically, and we were kind of hyping him up 2 weeks ago. Before the duels, or 2 weeks ago when we did the first show. We were excited. We said this guy is a guy that can get into anything and drive it well. Obviously, world renowned for his freestyle abilities on a dirt bike, and then he becomes a world renowned rallycross racer. I mean, you have to be good behind the wheel, no matter what you're driving, to be, world championship caliber in multiple disciplines. And they're not even remotely close. One's on 2 wheels, one's on 4. I think it just speaks to the type of guy that Travis is. He can get behind the wheel of anything and succeed. I've obviously very outspoken about how well he did this weekend and how excited I was. I grew up watching him on dirt bikes, just in complete awe of what he was doing. So it was really awesome to just see somebody that I grew up in total, starstruck by what he did. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, it was fun to see him out there, and he finished well. Unfortunately for Connor Daly, I don't think he'll be coming back to the money team.
Oh, maybe not there, but he alluded to the fact that he's not done in NASCAR.
Yeah, he's probably going to try to run some more races this year. I think he may have had some more potentially with the money team, but that whole operation embarrassed themselves this weekend.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say it. It started with the short that burned out the oil line. They had to drive all the way back to North Carolina to get it. The car wasn't set up properly, even if it did go out to qualify, because it was set too low on the shocks. And then they got into the race, and there was just, that engine just had no speed whatsoever. And somehow the mirror fell off in the car.
And in the duels, did you see when they got started in the duels?
Oh, yeah, the car was doing the wobble.
Was worse.
As I mentioned at the beginning. It was doing the wobble down the front stretch.
If Lewis Hamilton was watching that race, he'd have had PTSD, because that 50 car that Connor Daly was in was 50 times worse than porpoising.
Oh, yeah. That was a teeth rattler.
Yeah. Porpoising, they were going up and down maybe like an inch and a half. Connor Daly's car was going up and down like 6 inches.
Yeah.
And so he said that, it was actually a really good listen. If you want to listen to the his podcast was called Speed Street on Dirty Mo Media, and he talked all about his weekend, the ups and the downs. Like, he had already booked his ticket out of there. He thought that once he didn't get his qualifying thing, he said, "Okay, I'm just going to fly out on Friday and be done." And then he raced his way in on Thursday. It was really interesting to hear his take. And he borrowed a steering wheel from Austin Hill, I think, was right next to him in the garage. He ended up borrowing his steering wheel to race the duels. When he got his way in. Then he went out and bought one. And when that fuel line burnt up, they went all around the garage, but nobody had a spare. So he was talking about how awesome the garage was and how really connected everybody was. If you needed something, they were not afraid to go ask other teams, "Hey, do you got this? Do you got that?" Yeah, I mean, he borrowed a steering wheel from another driver, for goodness sakes. So it was just nobody had that extra part on him, and this is one of those things where why are we not practicing? They would have known.
That
They
is
would have
what
figured it out.
that annoys me so much. We're still doing that truncated practice and qualifying thing this week. Well, we might not even have practice and qualifying because of the weather again, because everything's on Saturday. NASCAR, one session, 1 hour practice, then qualifying, then you can race on Sunday. That's all people are asking for. I don't understand this obsession to make it hot laps.
And I've been listening to I listen to pretty much all the podcasts. I listen to Denny Hamlin, I listen to Dale Jr., I listen to Speed Street, I listen to everybody, and everybody is saying the exact same thing. Why on earth, for the first race of the season, did we not have one practice session before qualifying? Why? Denny Hamlin is like, and he comes at it with probably the most level-headed. He goes, I get that we as owners have been saying, you need to help us cut costs. You need to help us cut costs. But he goes, common sense has to play in somewhere. At some point, you just have to say,
Go
like, you know what I mean? Just, I don't even know how to articulate, but because Denny was just like, at some point you got to go with your gut, with your common sense, and say, hey, do you think it would be a good idea to not practice before qualifying for the first race of the season after people are coming back from 12 weeks away, 13 weeks away? Who said, no, we shouldn't practice? Somebody said it. Somebody had to have said, we're not going to practice. We're going to go right into it. And then other people had to say, you know what? That's a great idea. We're going to go with that.
I mean, NASCAR is into this whole thing where the owner, they basically push it off on the owners and say, well, they asked us to cut costs. They didn't ask you to cut costs like this. Nobody asked you to neuter practice.
I think it's one of those things where NASCAR's thinking that maybe the teams are getting too much power, and just like a child, they're throwing a tantrum, saying, oh, you know what? You asked for no practice. Guess what? You said you didn't want to practice, so we're not making you anymore. Right? Like when a kid says, I'm not hungry for dinner, and the parents say, okay, fine. And then a couple hours later, oh, can I get a snack before bed? Nope, you didn't want to eat, remember? This is what NASCAR is doing. It's just a petty stop, we're going to really stick it to you so you stop complaining about other things.
I mean, it's just going to make them complain about this. We have got to get practice back. And it makes no sense. And they try to use post-COVID as an excuse. Formula One practiced during COVID. IndyCar practiced during COVID. NHRA's practice is qualifying, so they don't really count. NASCAR's the only one that has shortened their practice since this. And we didn't even practice when we came back originally from COVID, which we'll get into that when we get to that anniversary. But I don't know if NASCAR's paying attention, but this is the type of hubris that led to the IndyCar split, and it wasn't fun for them. You do not want to go down this road. Like, we have got to get practice back in NASCAR. And here's the thing. You want to help the teams with their costs? Up the prize money. Get some more TV money to go to the 36 teams that are chartered, and we won't be having these issues. That's going to help them more than not practicing.
Exactly. Or, there's other ways. Goodyear's making a killing off of tires.
Yeah.
Tell them, hey, you drop your prices down a little bit. You got to be a little more realistic. You're the exclusive supplier, but that doesn't mean you can charge exclusive supplier prices. We'll find somebody else that'll do it cheaper. There are ways to cut costs. Sunoco. I know Sunoco's been around forever. But you can say, hey, look,
I think with the fuel, NASCAR pays for that. So they don't even have to worry about that.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I mean, there's just other things you can do to cut the costs. And I don't know. We talk about how, and this is a much deeper conversation that we probably don't really need to go into, but we always hear about talking about the value, right? People always say you can't shorten the race because that gets rid of all the value. For the people that are for ticket buyers anyway, for the people that are actually going to the race, why would they want to go watch a race that maxes out at 2 hours like Formula One? You're usually, hour and a half with Formula One. No one's going to go watch it. Well, not when you take away practice, but if you can get back to making it a weekend event instead of a 1 day event, you got to get back to the people back to the track for the full weekend, because that's where they're spending their money in the merch trailers. They're spending their money on concessions and actually helping the local economy of that area. People come up to Watkins Glen. If they were just, a lot of the people that are going can just drive in for the day, and that does nothing to help the local economy there. It does nothing for the vendors. But if you can get back to making it the weekend, you bring a lot of money in. But
Absolutely.
Right now, they've decided they don't want to do a weekend event anymore. They want you to drive in for the day, watch the race, and go home.
I mean, at this point, I won't buy a 2-day ticket anymore.
No, there's
no point.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I wanted to go and see practice, stay around for qualifying, and then see the race. I know when I went to Daytona in 2008, they had both qualifying days on Friday, and then they had the Xfinity race that night, and then the Cup race was on Saturday. I'm not going to go down there. Now, we didn't go to practice for that race because we were doing other stuff. It was a week-long trip, and so we did other things during the week. But if you want people to come to spend that weekend ticket, you have to give them stuff at the track that is going on for a lengthy amount of time during the weekend at the racetrack. You've got to keep them there to spend money, because at this point, what's the point of going? And yeah, people weren't spending a lot of money to go to practice on the Friday, but if you do it, you have the one practice for Xfinity for a Cup on Saturday. You have Xfinity and Cup practice on Saturday, Xfinity Cup qualifying, then the Xfinity race. That keeps everybody there all day on Saturday or whenever it is. You have them there all day. They're spending money. They're buying concessions. They're going to the merch trailer. And at least there, it makes it worth buying the weekend ticket. It's not worth it buying the weekend ticket right now. And they've got to fix that going forward, which kind of leads into what we're going to talk about off track with the situation with Auto Club. They haven't done a lot of promotion for the qualifying day on Saturday. And another thing they're doing, this is the last race with this current layout, and we don't know if we're going to race at Fontana again because there's been no communication about it. Originally, it was going to be a short track. Suddenly, they're non-committal about that. This could really be, and Larry B is going to this race, the last race at Auto Club, and we just don't know it because nobody is committing to what's going to happen with this facility.
Yeah, and these plans were rolled out 2 years ago now, I think it was. So and this goes back to something that I think Denny Hamlin was saying, and this is where I say you should really listen to his podcast because it's really good.
It is.
But NASCAR does not need to own the tracks.
No.
NASCAR could save a ton of money by not owning tracks. And it's just one of those things that, it's all a circular motion, right? Mm-hmm. So NASCAR says we can't give you more TV money because we need to invest more money into our facilities. Denny Hamlin says, why not just get rid of the facilities and you run them for the weekend? It'll be a lot cheaper. And I happen to agree. So you see things happening with Auto Club and all these reconfigurations, repays. We just reconfigured Atlanta, Texas, which is a monstrosity. They're talking about redoing that. I mean, you get all of these different
Well,
projects going on.
Texas is
Texas
that's the other one. Is it ISC that does that? That's theirs. I'll Google it because I can't remember which one it is, but I think Texas is under wherever Bruton Smith is. But the point still stands that you would save some money by making the tracks independent. I don't know why they decided to buy up. Speedway Motorsports owns Texas Motor Speedway. I will never understand why NASCAR bought ISC, which owns Daytona. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
That should have remained a private-ish entity outside doing its own thing. Bringing that under the NASCAR umbrella itself was such an ill-advised idea. And now it's put us in this situation where you can't give money to your teams like you should be because you're spending on a bunch of tracks you shouldn't be owning.
Yep. Yeah, and the tracks are just money pits. That you're just sinking all this money in, and you take on all the liability. You take all the costs, you take all the liability, and you're not actually gaining anything. I don't know what they're gaining besides more value, right? The company becomes worth more because they own all of this real estate. But how valuable is your company if no one can afford to be a part of it?
I mean, the real estate doesn't matter if you're not going to race on it. Like, you're not in the real estate business, you're in the racing business.
Correct, but sometimes it feels like they're not necessarily in the racing business. With all of these privately owned tracks, it feels like they are more in the real estate business. And racing just pays for it.
Yep.
I don't know. NASCAR is fundamentally broken, just like Formula One was before Liberty Media. I truly think that NASCAR needs new leadership.
I think someone's got to pull a Roger Penske and buy it. I think if we're going to go down that road, like one of the owners is going to have to step up and say, "Look, Rick Hendrick says, look, I'm going to turn my team over to Jeff Gordon. I'm going to put this money together. Here's like $3 billion. I'm going to take over NASCAR."
Yeah, and maybe it's a couple of the OGs of NASCAR. Maybe it's not necessarily the OGs, but the money. Maybe it's that's. I was gonna say maybe Joe Gibbs hands it off, but obviously we lost Coy this past year. He doesn't really have anyone to hand it over to, probably besides Ty or another grandkid. But maybe like a Roger Penske and a Rick Hendrick, maybe you get a couple of these big, deep money pocket guys, just go in on it together and buy it out. Michael Jordan's got the money. He could just buy it outright himself. He
made what, like $500,000? What, he made like several $1 billion last year off of shoes, and he hasn't played in how long now?
Yeah. His money's never stopping.
Yeah. This got doom and gloom all of a sudden. But anyway, one last thing before we move on to Formula One. Frankie Muniz finished 11th. He was impressive in his first ARCA race. Was in the top 10 at one point. Had a chance at the win. Unfortunately, got caught up in an accident. Finished 11th in that race. He did a great job. I can't wait to see how he does in Phoenix. But we have to tip the cap to the winner of that race. And I just lost the link, but I'm gonna get it back up in a minute. But while I'm sitting here looking for that, Chris, what did you think of Frankie's day?
I thought that it was great. He was in line for a really good finish, probably a top 5, maybe even could have, there was a scenario where he could have got the win, possibly depending on how a couple different things shaked out. But he was doing really well. Kind of got collected in that lap, I don't know, mid-teens anyway. Mid-teens was the lap where that accident happened. He got collected up and it got some damage, but in like a dozen laps, this guy drives from mid 20th up to 11th.
Mm-hmm.
That shows for a guy that really hasn't been in a race car in like a decade. I think, I mean, it's been years since he's really been in a race car. What a drive, honestly. Just what a drive.
I think I'm looking at it. I think he got involved in lap 60, the debris that ended up causing the caution lap 61. He got involved in that. There was that little kerfuffle coming back because they were trying their best to have a big one. But to come all the way back to 11, that's incredible.
They really were trying their best to have a big one.
Yep.
I thought it was coming about half a dozen times at least per lap.
Yeah.
And
that's
just that
for you.
Just that drive at the end, though. I mean, he comes back from the mid 20s to 11th in 12 laps. I mean, that's just, especially for a super speedway where I know that there's a lot of passing, but you have to be very calculated in how you pass.
Mm-hmm.
You know, super speedways, you don't just drive around somebody. You have to have help to do it, or you just have to have such a run. And the fact that he did all of, he made up over 10 spots in less than 12 laps. I mean, that's good. I mean, he will have turned some heads in the Truck Series or even Xfinity by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's here all season. He's running full time in the number 30 car. And so I will be tuning in every week that they have a race to watch Frankie, and he actually liked one of my tweets where I said that I was watching because of him, and I'd continue watching as long as he was in the series, and he actually liked it, which was pretty cool. So
yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out as well. They'll be in Phoenix. I think all the races are going to be on FS1 or FS2 this year as well, so that helps a ton.
Yep. So I don't know if Daryl, if you like grew up watching him on TV, but it's kind of cool seeing, somebody that you grew up watching on TV and in the movies and stuff. Now he's running NASCAR all these years later, and it's just kind of one of those full circle kind of cool things to see.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I remember watching Malcolm in the Middle and for him to go from that show to on the racetrack. And they actually filmed an episode of that show at the Irwindale Speedway back in the day. So to see him go from filming a show to actually on the track, it's incredible. And I can't wait to see what he does this season.
Yep, absolutely. I'm very excited for it.
So we're going to Auto Club this weekend. As I've said multiple times, the weather is not looking good for that racetrack. It's going to be the first. It'll be the first downforce race of the year to really show where these cars are in the pecking order. It's going to be the last one for this layout. 2 mile an hour fast, multiple grooves. It's going to be a humdinger once we get going. I don't know how the track is going to be because I don't think we're going to get a lot of rubber on it due to how the weather is going to be this weekend. But you're going to see cars from the bottom to the wall, and it's going to allow these drivers to really find whatever groove fits their car. But whoever can get it set up to run top, bottom, middle, first, it can run all those lines well, it's probably the guy that's going to come home with the trophy.
Yeah, and it's gonna be fun to see who comes out and unloads well, and I'm happy racing's back, Daryl. I'm happy we've got just this weekend, and then next weekend we've got the holy grail of race weekends, or the second holy grail besides the our favorite weekend, Monaco. For some of us, but all the racing on Memorial Day weekend is great.
Most of it is great, but anyway,
well, 2 of 3, right?
Yeah, 2 of 3. But what I will say, I hope we get a race like last year at Auto Club, which was just incredible, and how well that race played out. First one of the new car really showed that, and we saw early, this car can pass. And it's going to be a lot of fun on these super speedways, or not super speedways, intermediate tracks. Should be a lot of fun on Sunday, and we'll sunset this place with a great race.
Absolutely. I hope it turns out just like last year, because a spoiler alert for when we get to nearest the win, I picked last year's winner, Kyle Larson.
Yeah. And we'll get to those picks in a minute. But, of course, before we get out of here, of course, we got to talk a little bit about Formula One. They did start their testing this week. Not sure how much we're going to get into it because it's day one. And I'm going to just be honest. Nothing you see during these next 3 days is going to matter.
No.
Other than...
I see the morning classification. I see Max is up front, and I already called my tattoo guy to get the third trophy next to the little Max on my leg. So
yeah,
I actually don't have any tattoos, but
yeah, and Aston Martin's going to finish second in the championship.
I cannot tell you how excited I am to see Max is basically already a shoe-in for the championship based on 2 sessions of practice this year.
I mean, hey, we'll see what we can do. I mean, the only car that was really probably running hard was the Red Bull, because it's basically a updated version of the car from last year. They didn't change that much. So they didn't have a lot of the testing gear on it, and they just went out there and just ran laps and just ran hard all day. The other teams, obviously, are trying to dial in their cars. The Haas had a really bad porpoising during the afternoon session, but Mercedes, and this is the only words I wanted to hear all weekend, no porpoising on the W14. That's all I care about.
And I tell you what, Daryl, we did not talk about, because we didn't get the opportunity to, but did Mercedes just reveal the best livery on the grid this year? Because we didn't even get the opportunity last week to talk about Ferrari and the Mercedes. Those were the only two that hadn't been released yet at our last episode. Talk about saving the best for last. Ferrari had one of the best reveals I've ever seen. They made a full-on, I mean, a lot of people make a full-on event about it. But, I mean, they had the Tifosi there. I mean, that was a great way to debut their car. And then Mercedes just says, you know what? Back in black, baby. Back in black. And I love that Mercedes car.
That car was beautiful. And I love the Ferrari had the best reveal of everybody. That was just a performance for the ages. But the black Mercedes, yes, please. Give me that every time.
I think F1 did a Twitter poll, and I don't think the Mercedes won the best livery. In fact, I think a lot of people thought that it was not the most impressive. However, I do have to say that if we go with the most improved livery, because I feel like we didn't really get the opportunity to give liveries what they deserve, because these designers put in just hundreds of hours into designing these cars. And I mean, just these teams, I mean, this is truly an art form. And I don't think that we were able to give them the proper kudos that they deserve. But everybody but Red Bull, who just said we're going to copy and paste last year's, everybody did a great job. But Haas, MoneyGram team, that car was transformed.
Yes.
They went from looking like a backmarker team to looking like they're ready for a podium. I mean, that car just looks competitive now, whereas it never did before.
Oh, it looks incredible, and I cannot wait. Well, hopefully it runs as well as it looks. Obviously, they had some trouble on day one, but it's early, and to be honest with Formula One testing, we're not going to know the pecking order until qualifying for Bahrain, which I think is next. It's on our
Wait,
sheet here.
and even then, we won't
week.
even. It is no.
Yeah, March 5th. That's next week. Next Sunday.
Well, yeah, two Sundays from today. Yeah.
2 Sundays from today, obviously. But
I consider this coming weekend to be next weekend sometimes.
I understand, but yeah, we won't know till Saturday, and really won't know till like qualifying 3 for the top teams. Where the car is.
Yeah. Now is this year's when they're doing the changed qualifying, right? Hards for 1, mediums for 2, and softs for 3.
I haven't heard anything like that for Formula 1.
Okay.
So I hope that's not. Stop changing Formula 1 qualifying. It's
Am I
fine.
right?
Like,
did you just look it up?
No, I'm just saying. Like,
okay.
I haven't heard anything about them changing anything with the tire compounds. So we'll find out next week, honestly. Although I feel like we would have heard something about that because folks get really agitated when they change Formula 1 qualifying. But testing will be around this weekend. I'll be making posts on social media about how it's going. And then next week, we race in Formula 1. Going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And Season 5, Drive to Survive, debuts tomorrow. So I will be watching that, binging it all night. Because I've heard some sneak peeks about stuff that's in there. So there is one of the later episodes, I forget what it's titled, but apparently the Oscar Piastri drama did make this season, or it make it in. And what you see in one of the episodes, and I think it's fairly obvious. I think Zach is actually the thumbnail for the episode. Yeah, and it's one of the later ones, one of the last 2 or 3. But apparently it shows Zach approaching Alpine and saying, "Have you considered Daniel for your car yet?" Mm-hmm. And this is before the Piastri deal is even public. He's approaching them saying, "Have you considered Daniel?" Which means that which we already knew, they were trying to move him before the whole Oscar Piastri. They knew what they were doing well in advance. And so it's just interesting seeing them. It's going to be interesting seeing how this all played out in the slightly over dramatized DTS way.
Yeah, it's going to be. We're going to see a lot of backroom stuff, and I think a lot of people are going to have their opinions changed on certain folks by the time this ends.
I don't think my opinion of Zach Brown could go lower. There's only room for improvement.
Yeah, Zach really, really has not helped himself the last couple of years and how he's handled some things. But yeah, can't wait for Drive to Survive or the Formula 1 Championship.
Bahrain's 2 weeks away. St. Pete's 2 weeks away.
Season's in full swing at this point. We got the NHRA coming up as well.
March 5th is a big weekend.
Yeah, it is. And after that, we'll have the Gator Nationals in NHRA. AMA Supercross is in full swing right now. There's just a lot of racing going on. WEC will also be back in Sebring. And V8 Supercars will be starting up here soon as well with their new car, the Gen 3.
Yep.
And they'll be going to the Newcastle 500. That's going to be March 10th through 12th. I'll be able to watch that at some point on Motor Trend On Demand. I'm not going to be staying up for those races. They're just way too late.
Yeah, but we got new cars, as you already said. But looking forward to seeing the new look this season.
Oh, I've already seen some of those paint schemes come up on Twitter.
So have I.
Oh, they look so good. These cars look so good.
You know what? Everybody, I wish NASCAR would just give supercar liveries a chance.
Yes.
Because, and maybe it wouldn't really work with how the NASCAR, they got the wide body kits and they don't really actually look stock if you think about it. Mm-hmm. Whereas whereas the supercars, they do look incredibly stock. Um, so maybe it wouldn't look as good, but oh, I just love the way that the supercars look. They really, when it comes to liveries, they have the best like in the world. I wouldn't. I just some of them look phenomenal.
Yes. Can't wait to see those cars on track. This is my favorite part of the year because racing is finally back. And before we go, this time last year, we were doing a much different show. Tomorrow actually marks the 1-year anniversary of the start of the war in Ukraine, which started with Russia, Russian president, but in all intents and purposes, dictator, Vladimir Putin, announced a special military operation into Ukraine. What a lot of us thought was just a renewed push in the east became a full-scale invasion of the country on the night of February 24th, 2023. It was theorized that Ukraine would fall within a week. It has been a year. Ukraine still stands. And that war had profound changes around the world, how Russia was viewed economically, in motorsports definitely. We saw Nikita Mazepin lose his ride in Formula One because of it. We saw many Ukrainians that race as well. Their seasons were upended as they had to trade in their fire suits for fatigues. Many of them did not survive the year. But as we start, or as the second year of this war begins, Ukraine has an opportunity to secure their country. They have an opportunity to secure their future that we did not see coming, and we will always support Ukraine in their fight for liberty. And Chris, I remember that show. We were getting ready for the Formula One season. We didn't really talk a lot of racing because it was just shocking what had happened. Because I was getting ready to lay down for the night, and I was checking Twitter and saw that the invasion had started. And I just turned on TV, and you're watching the CNN anchors talking, and they have to duck down to avoid cruise missiles. It really put a lot of things into perspective watching what was happening that night.
Yeah, I can. They say that there are things that happen in life, and you just kind of remember where you were. You remember a lot of things about that day. 9/11 being probably for us, Daryl, the first big major life event where I can tell you where I was. I can tell you I was in school, which you probably were too, I would imagine.
Yep.
Obviously it being a Tuesday morning, I can tell you what, if we went to my elementary school right now, I could walk you to what classroom I was sitting in, and I could tell you what desk I was in. I was in the third from the door, the third row out of 5, and the fourth desk back. I can tell you exactly where I was when this happened. It's just one of those things. And when the news broke about the war in Ukraine, I was actually right here in my basement, doing a couple things. Just picked up my phone, checked Twitter, and oh shit. And I remember just being up. I don't think I left Twitter for like 3 weeks straight. I was just refresh, joining all these groups, following all these accounts that are giving you updates, and it was just.
I still keep track of those accounts to this day, by the way, because I remember getting into all those lists and getting onto Reddit and locking onto those. It's really the first conflict, like major conflict, to take place in the time of social media where the internet access was strong enough to provide us really up to the minute coverage of what was going on. And we saw a lot of folks grabbing open source data to track attacks and flight patterns. And you see we're seeing videos from Ukrainian battle groups in combat that same day. Like, this is footage that you would have dreamed of in World War II, but to see it now live, it was surreal to think about.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing I will say about the whole situation, Ukraine never one time gave up. They are still fighting. Unfortunately, lives have been lost, many of them senselessly, because of, we're just going to keep it a buck, war crimes committed by Russia that led to a loss of life.
It's greed.
And at the end of the day, Ukraine is still fighting, and they're getting support from Western nations, and a lot of people do believe Ukraine's going to win this war.
I believe it, and I hope so. I mean, I think that I realistically think that once they made it a month out, we were like, okay, they got a shot. 2 months out, okay. Oh wow, they're doing this. 3 months out. Oh dang, they really got this. 4, 5, 6, 7 months out. Okay, and now it's to the point where it feels inevitable, especially since they're kind of starting to go on the offensive. In the last couple months, they're starting to actually go into Russia a little bit. So I think they've got this under control. I think that as far as support goes, Russia is obviously a very it's a really sensitive topic to talk about, just because they do have nuclear capacity. So I understand why NATO really took a hands-off approach, and I know that there was criticism for it, but at the end of the day, you have to remember that they do have nuclear capabilities.
How much of that even works at this point, given this status of the Russian military?
But if they launched one off successfully, we wouldn't be talking about how.
If they launch one off successfully, it's a much different conversation. You're absolutely right.
It would be why did we do that? We should have just why we as Americans as a whole, and this is a whole social generalization, that we're a racing podcast, so
yeah, but there's only so much of this we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so it's almost over, but we're overly critical of situations that we think that we would have handled differently, and we do have certain prejudices that people have no problem flaunting. If there's a problem in the Middle East, we say, why don't we just let them handle it? Why don't we just that's not our problem. Why are we sending our people over there to lose their lives? Or let's just bomb them all and be done with it. I mean, you hear, when it comes to the Middle Eastern bias and prejudices that our country has against Middle Eastern people as a whole, and then you apply it to Russia, where they're like, well, we shouldn't be going in there, and we should let them help, but Trump would have just went in there and take care of business. Why are we sitting back on the sidelines and not doing this? It really comes down to what side of the political spectrum you're on. For most people overall, I think that we did it the right way. We've been giving them anything they need: firepower, javelins, artillery. We have been supporting them, and probably much more than the American people really think and know about, and that's okay with me. I don't think that a lot of people could handle the information, and there's no way to keep that information sealed once it's out. I think we're much more involved than people think, and I think that other countries in NATO are also much more involved than others think, but they can't be out and open about it because Russia has those nukes, and China is aligned with Russia, and there's a whole global political game that we have to maintain a certain reputation throughout the world, and NATO has to maintain what they do. it's much more complicated, and I really don't want this to turn into
basically
politics.
Yeah, basically to wrap it up, it's a complicated situation, but I'd rather be sitting here talking about it as a complicated situation than the 1-year anniversary of the death of Ukraine. So, Slava Ukraini, and we will hopefully at next year we'll be talking about the victory of Ukraine against Russia in a war that should not have started.
I think we'll be talking about it before we know who the champions are in our 3 series that we really track. I think we'll have a victory.
Yep. So, speaking of victory, it's time to pick nearest the win and go over our results for the first week. And Michael is not with us yet, but currently leads the point standings as our 2 picks got caught up in wrecks. So, nearest the win, Michael leads with 17 points. I'm 3 points back with 20. And Chris, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry what happened to Tyler Reddick there at the end of stage 1. Just got absolutely taken out.
And for those of you following along, you might be wondering, Michael's got 17 points. We're only 1 race in. How do they have so many points? We are paying points based off of the position your driver finishes this year. So we're playing the golf game. At the end of the season, you want the least amount of points. So Michael has 17, Daryl 20, and I am in dead last with 39. I am almost double Daryl. So it's not a great way to start the season, but like I said on Twitter, there's 74 more races to go this year, Daryl, that we pay points for in nearest the win. 74 more races. This is one of 75. So I am not too worried about it because there is a lot of way to go, and anything can happen. So
and anything can and will happen this week as we head over to Auto Club. So we've got Michael taking Kevin Harvick this week. I am taking our defending champion Joey Logano. And Chris, who do you have?
I am taking last year's Auto Club winner, Kyle Larson.
Yep, going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully Kyle doesn't put his teammate in the wall this time, but
hopefully Kyle doesn't get put in the wall when he's in 39th.
Yeah.
Or in stage 1.
Yeah. So good luck to those drivers and to everyone's favorite driver this weekend as we are racing for NASCAR at Auto Club Speedway. Hopefully not for the last time. You can watch that race on Fox this weekend. So that'll about do it for this episode of The Extra Mile. Remember, if you want to talk to us online, I'm at DK Jr. 12. Chris is at Fiji Sims. Remember to follow our pages on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and of course Facebook and the YouTube repository for iSports Radio as well. Make sure you keep it locked to all the iSports Radio social medias on Twitter and TikTok as well. And remember, if you missed any episode of any IE Sports Radio show, you can catch it wherever you can hear your podcast and the YouTube repository, which has a copy of every show we've ever done. So make sure you go and check that out. And usually around this time, we would leave with some upbeat music, but today I think we're going to end it on a quiet note, just to remember all the lives that were lost in the war in Ukraine that begins its 2nd year tomorrow. For Chris, my name is Daryl. This is The Extra Mile. We will see you at the next green flag, and we will leave with a moment of silence for those lives lost in Ukraine.